Hello, and welcome to our panel. So let's start right at the foundation. One of the biggest misconceptions around blockchain, or at least some of them, come from a lack of understanding around what they are and what they do, yet they're pretty foundational to cryptocurrency and so many of the things that we're going to talk about today. So Liat, I want to start by asking you, what is the blockchain, the what, and how is Horizen Labs advancing that technology? And then Lior, I want you to go into the why, because there's a pretty important value system behind the technology.
Sure. So blockchain, the technology behind cryptocurrency, which is just one use case, is a decentralized ledger technology, if you will, a big shared spreadsheet that has particular rules on how you add information and an immutable characteristic where you can't take off information. So there's a lot of opportunity in that between groups of people that need to trust each other without having a central conduit that you can trust, so a trustless environment. The technology itself, though, is, although it's been around for a while, many, many years in fact, is still a little clunky, and there's a lot of opportunity to make it scalable and accessible to more people to use, because it is very complex. So at Horizen Labs, we are trying to solve what's called the blockchain trilemma, which is inherent problems to the technology the way that it is today, in that blockchain has security, privacy, and scalability issues. So at Horizen Labs, we're a deep tech company working on trying to solve those problems, in particular the issue of privacy, because we believe that in order for it to be widely used, some of the information needs to be immutable, but some of the information needs to stay private. So we use zero-knowledge mathematical proofs, but I don't want to go too deep into that. I think more important to think about the why.
Yeah, so, okay. I think the why is one of perhaps the most important conversations around crypto, and way before we even started talking about the properties of scalability or understanding what's possible and what's not, I think the premise of cryptocurrencies and blockchain in the first place is probably the most important and fundamental thing to bring us to where we are, and these incredible markets and these incredible applications. But really going back to, I think, what you said about, essentially trying to understand, this fundamental why, I think goes back to really the core of, society, the core of culture. And I think, these properties that we've been talking about in blockchain, essentially, I think one of them is super important, and it sheds a lot of light as to the why, and that's called decentralization. Right? The idea of decentralization, meaning security and actually anti-fragility to an extent, is I think something that we as a human species have been always trying to go back to for the last 4,000 years. And I can give you a bunch of stories when decentralization of information, of governance, brought essentially more harmony and peace and fairness to our world. And essentially, this is what we're trying to reproduce with these technologies. And so Bitcoin being the first kind of decentralized money was the first kind of inkling of what decentralization is able to bring. But now finally we're able to bring this into other kind of social constructs and applications that go beyond the financial use case. And I think that this is where Natalie might have a lot to add.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we talked about previously is one of the structures that blockchain enables is the DAO, or the Decentralized Autonomous Organization. So, Natalie, can you talk to us a bit about how that will change the way that we do business in the future?
Yeah, sure. So I think the ideas that Lior alluded to, that a lot of the blockchain ideology early on was driven by libertarian ideas and bringing the power back to people. We find a lot of that within DAOs, right? So to me, there's a lot of different definitions, but to me, DAOs are essentially online communities plus ownership. So I think organizing or structuring organizations such that people get to participate in rewards and in decision making just creates many, many more efficient structures, right? So we all know traditional issues in big corporations with inefficient management and so on. And I think that the DAO structure, or generally like the ability to restructure from the traditional hierarchical setup, can be very powerful in improving decision making and in giving people just generally greater joy in the jobs that they hold and the work that they do. And I think we've already seen in Web 2 that online communities are super, super powerful, right? I mean, think about Wikipedia, think about Reddit. There's a lot of projects that are just very, very successful. And now if you would add in a sensible incentive structure into that, I think that very, very, like, really incredible things can be achieved. And again, in the traditional world, we already have such a thing, right? We already have cooperatives. So cooperatives are really amazing, but unfortunately, they're kind of hard to set up. Maybe just as a reminder, they and I'm sure everyone knows, but they are essentially, as opposed to profit-driven, they're member-driven, right? They're meant to benefit the member, as opposed to meant to maximize the profit line, the bottom line. And I think that DAOs have a lot in common with cooperatives, but they're just so much easier to spin up, and the barrier to entry to start a DAO is a lot lower. So when we're kind of talking about the future of business, right, or what corporations are going to look like, the truth is, I don't really know what kind of organizations are going to be DAOs. I think that it's kind of a space that we have to watch, because completely new structures will emerge. So we won't just, take Web 2 organizations and like slap them into a DAO kind of framework. Like, we might have completely new groups emerging doing amazing things.
That'll be exciting to see. Now, talking about a shift, I'm going to move on to another 3-letter acronym, maybe a more controversial one, the NFT. Now, after a year of super buzzy hype around them, we've since seen reports that the value of the NFT is declining. Sales have dipped, but that's not the end of NFTs. And I think the three of you have some pretty interesting insights as to where they're going. So starting with Natalie, what do you think is next for the NFT?
Yeah, so I'm extremely bullish on NFTs, right? I'm a big fan. I know that in 2021, they kind of got a rap of just being like JPEGs. But essentially in NFTs, anything that's not a token, anything that's non-divisible. And you can think of a billion of sensible applications for that, right? Like, you can think of property rights, you can think of membership rights, patents. There's like a really, really long list of use cases where it could make sense, and I think that's already happening, right? So we already see like people putting sync licenses on, or like representing them as NFTs. And to come back to DAOs, actually, the most common membership for DAOs at the moment is like token-based voting. But if you have membership-based voting, that's represented by an NFT too. So one member represents one token, and that's one vote, right? So I think that NFTs are not going anywhere. Also, the JPEGs aren't going anywhere. There's going to be more successful projects and less successful projects. But overall, I feel like this is definitely here to stay.
Am I next? Okay. I think NFTs, a lot of people like to think about the metaverse and it being mainly experiential. However, the more we kind of look into this, the more we understand that the real metaverse will actually be built on decentralized rails, and these decentralized rails will obviously include, or the assets that are found within these metaverses, whichever they may be, are going to be mainly containing NFTs, because this is actually the best way of proving ownership and making that ownership unique and permissionless and boundless and decentralized and yada yada, right? And we all know how Bored Apes and other kind of NFTs have started this cultural revolution, or at least accelerated to a huge extent. I think that this is only the very, very tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're going to see based on this technology. And so, whether or not prices dip for a few months or a year or a few years, the fundamental premise of utilizing this technology, this core technology, to enable ownership, to enable new essentially ways of holding value, of creating tangible value, that's not going anywhere. And so this cultural revolution that started with financial freedom is now kind of oozing into all these other properties like sovereign ownership and essentially indelible proof that what is yours, and it's not walled. It's not within this walled garden. And so, whether it's, NFTs enabling DAOs or NFTs enabling, financial markets, we're already seeing how in DeFi, the most successful application of DeFi currently found in Uniswap, is utilizing NFTs in order to enable this stuff, right? And so right now, up until now, we have not seen a better use case for blockchains that it has been so fundamentally important on so many different kind of value systems. So whether it's, us trying to rebuild finance, whether it's us trying to, sell tickets to concerts or memberships to, whatever it is, I think that NFTs will play a huge role in that.
Well, certainly that was a lot said and not much to add, but I will just say that whatever you think about NFTs, and clearly it's, when people think about NFTs, they are not really thinking about the underlying technology, but the kind of the craze in art. What can be said for it for sure is that it has been a gateway. The fact that it's ubiquitous and everyone knows what an NFT is already making a huge headway to being able to use this technology, even if the present use case is not going to be the prevalent one.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And one of the things we know cryptocurrency for being is very volatile. Yeah, during the pandemic, I mean, that's a bit of an understatement. During the pandemic, we saw kind of a widening adoption of cryptocurrency as legal tender in some countries, like El Salvador, for example. Tesla now accepts Dogecoin. Do you think moves like this will help to speed up kind of institutional acceptance of cryptocurrency and also regulation? And I'll start with you, Liat.
Well, I'll leave you guys to toss the rest of it, but I will say something about regulation. I think to the extent that it can become more prevalent and more used, it will require regulation. And regulation to a lot of the libertarians out there sounds like, oh, anathema, we don't want it. It's supposed to be for the people, by the people. But the reality is that for mass adoption, regulation also provides clarity, and without that clarity, it is very hard to see how it goes beyond the fringe.
Yeah, I think the adoption of crypto is going to be from all sides. The adoption of this technology will come, through financial use cases, through culture, like we just talked about, with NFTs, through social organization, like DAOs, and so just going back to what the most fundamental thing is about, crypto and this technology in the first place is that it finally does things that for, again, thousands of years we were kind of unable to do or unable to sustain, right? So decentralization is great, but without the incentives to maintain it that way, then you don't really get anywhere. And so, with Bitcoin being like the fundamental, I guess, a leader in what constitutes as decentralized money, right? And a gradual acceptance of that across the world, whether it's El Salvador or slowly more and more kind of larger economies and financial ecosystems come to terms with that being like the asset, the decentralized money, the decentralized gold, whatever you want to call it. I think will definitely accelerate the adoption across every kind of landscape, right? And the cool thing about crypto is that, and this technology is that it's always been horizontal. There's never been like these vertical integrations that don't touch anything else. And so I think that adoption will be across the board, and the more people know about Bitcoin, the more people will know about NFTs. The more people know about NFTs, the more people will know about Bitcoin and Ethereum and all of these other value systems. So yeah, I think that's really cool.
I completely agree, and most of it was said, but essentially I just think anything that increases the market size overall, right, whether that's an NFT boom, will just force institutions and governments to try and accelerate the process of putting regulation in place so people know what they can do and what they cannot do. And you can also, in the DAO space, you can already see that places like Wyoming are already accepting or are already having a format for LLCs with, or DAOs to be wrapped in an LLC. So I definitely think that there's a lot of countries that or states that are experiencing the benefits from having clarity around cryptocurrency or blockchain regulation, and it attracts business, it attracts entrepreneurs, innovators. There's a few hotspots around the world that for whom this has worked as a use case. So I do think that other countries will look towards those experiments, also such as El Salvador, and then consider adopting something similar and try and develop and adapt as fast as they can.
And one of the things that blockchain technology also enables is our shift to Web3. So kind of an evolution from Web 2.0, where kind of content is the main kind of king, as we like to say, and also social networking. So Liat, I want to ask you, Horizen Labs is helping companies to prepare for this shift. Can you give us a sense of the industries that you're working with primarily, and some of the products that you're helping them to develop into, like the Metaverse, for example?
Yeah, so I think, and this follows my earlier point too, I think in the end, the Metaverse is going to be much more than what we see today. And the underlying technology under it, the Web 3.0, has a lot of promise for a more decentralized, more equitable, more democratic way to doing it. By the way, internet also promised that, and it ended up being much more concentrated. So as a small kind of caveat, I'll say that the cards are still out whether it can fulfill that promise. But to the extent it does, and what we're doing at Horizen Labs is helping projects launch fungible tokens, DAOs, and what we're seeing is that the gateway, the bridge into more mass adoption seems to be in the entertainment space. So whether it's gaming, art, music, a lot of music projects coming to us, it's places where I think a younger demographic and experience, like as gamers, in already doing peer-to-peer interactive activity, I think that's all lending itself to become a gateway for a much broader use case.
And so now we want to shift a little bit to the battle of the billionaires. So Bill Gates says he doesn't own any cryptocurrency. He doesn't believe that they have any valuable output. And yet Elon Musk is famously bullish on all things crypto. So, in your view, who will prevail? Natalie, I'll start with you.
I mean, I'm clearly biased, but I do think Elon Musk has a good idea of what will prevail. I do think that blockchain technology is the future. I think it's like a natural progression of technology that we've had in the past, right? Like we're essentially just automating away a lot of functions in a sensible manner. So I know that right now there's like a lot of sillier use cases out there, and in the past 5 years we've seen some scammy projects out there. But overall, I think from a technology perspective, this is where we're heading, and we're clearly still a far way off, right? Like I think as soon as we're all using applications that run on blockchain in the background, and we don't even know yet that we're using it. A little bit like El Salvador, right? Runs on the Algorand blockchain. A lot of people don't actually know that it runs on Algorand. They assume it's just Bitcoin settlement. That's when we have mass adoption. But I do think we're on our way there. Having said that, there's clearly also other industries to invest in that are interesting. But personally, I'm bullish on blockchain.
Yeah, I think so it's less about the battle of the billionaires. I think it's the battle of, the kind of theories and philosophies that a lot of people will start to adopt when, thinking about this kind of technology and these types of markets that are created, through this technology. And I think that, again, like nobody can really get it right, or at least nobody will get it right down to the T, right? So the one thing that I think people should start to agree on is the general direction in which this is going. And if I had to make a bet today on whether or not Dogecoin would work, right? I wouldn't take that bet. But the general direction of what this technology is able to apply to and enable, I think is a very, very interesting kind of thing to think about. And so Musk might have thought about it longer than Gates, but I think that Gates will one day open up to it as well.
I like the optimism.
Me too. So even though 2 or 3 of our panelists are women, most investors in and owners of digital currencies, cryptocurrencies, are men. Now, I want to know from you, firstly, Lior, what are you doing to close that gap in terms of ownership, investment, and interest in cryptocurrency, and also, you know, people working to advance blockchain technology? And then I want to also move on to Natalie and Liat, kind of what your experience has been and any advice you have for women wanting to get into the space.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is one of the biggest topics right now, social topics that have to do with our industry. You know, beyond the fact that I'm extremely proud of sitting here with 3 women talking about crypto. This has never happened in my career, five and a half years that I've been in crypto. I've never been in this situation, so I feel like we're making progress. And look, I think, you know, like a lot of things that are male-dominated, it's mainly down to, you know, how these kind of social interactions start. You know, there's a lot of internet and forum engagement, and there's a lot of weird lingo. It's you know, there's a lot of, first of all, skills that naturally bring you to, you know, this ecosystem that we found a lot more males in, right? At the same time, you know, it's extremely important to make sure that to make everybody understand that everyone is welcome to this industry, to this, you know, revolution. Again, this is not owned by anybody, and definitely not by guys, okay? Or at least it shouldn't be. And so I think that the fundamental thing that at least we're trying to do, you know, at Eden Block is, you know, empower women who have great ideas with capital, with advice, with, you know, resources in order for them to kind of, you know, feel like they can go out there and succeed. And I think that, you know, everybody should feel that, you know, regardless of their gender, regardless of their identity, of their race, creed, or otherwise, Web3 is extremely welcoming of everybody in terms, again, in terms of its ethos. And now it's really about executing and making sure that this moves in the right direction.
Well, I'll connect to something that Natalie said earlier. I think as this technology develops and it becomes less about having the technological skills to be able to program on blockchain, when it really does get to mass adoption, it's going to be used by people in a way that they don't know that there's even blockchain in the background. Just like I don't know the protocol that runs my emails, or when I do a search on Google, it's being solved on the back end. And what I think is really special about blockchain technology and what it does enable fundamentally is a much more democratic way to engage with it and a way to earn passive income. I think beyond gender, I think this is also a really big opportunity for the developing world generally.
Yeah, I strongly agree. And as a woman who's been so I've been in crypto full time since 2015, so I completely agree that back in the days there were even fewer women. But it's also not just symptomatic to crypto, right? So crypto just happens to be at the intersection of computer science, economics, math, and those are already, and finance, and those are already male-dominated industries. I have to say, personally, I found that the blockchain industry has been super welcoming towards women. I, most of the time, feel very encouraged. I do think that there's a lot of programs to try and get more women into crypto. Like tonight, I'm giving a lecture at the Frankfurt School of Economics to young, ambitious women trying to enter crypto. And I think that there's a lot of really, really powerful initiatives to increase the number. So I'm feeling super optimistic about more women entering the industry. And there's definitely ways to onboard them and to welcome them.
Brilliant. Well, we wish you the best of luck in this space and in your work to advance diversity. And thank you very much for your wonderful insights. It's been great to have you on, Liat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.